Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on my newest bin, which is now 41 days of age, but that bin is not what we see here. What's out here on the bench is the second thing listed over here, which is what I'm kind of referring to as sort of a cocoon nursery slash straggler container. Because when we launched off that brand newest of my bins, the 41-day-old system that we're preparing to feed, we actually populated that new bin with the worms that came out of two harvested systems, and the labels off those two harvested systems are here, and all the castings that had been harvested from those two systems is in this black tray. And the reason we didn't just really treat this as a finalized batch of castings was mainly because we assumed that it was still loaded with a bunch of worms. We didn't go through a really tedious process to make sure the majority of the worms were removed from the castings. We just sort of rounded them up to the best of our ability, and then we assumed that there were going to be stragglers. And we've already been in here once or twice, so we've already had an opportunity to see the stragglers hanging out here in this bait box. The bait box was positioned down here within the castings to try to round up the stragglers. And then I guess the other reference that I made earlier was a nursery, because sometimes you assume that there's going to also be some cocoons left behind. Possibly those cocoons, which usually need about, 3 weeks or so to hatch, might result in some baby worms. Well, this little guy here looks like he kind of didn't make it into the bait box. That's unfortunate. Not entirely dried out, but already beyond the point of resuscitation, I believe. I don't know, maybe we'll give this little guy the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'm just seeing no movement. Maybe there is some movement in there. But I do believe that that's just an unfortunate circumstance of a worm ending up out here on this dry material on the surface, rather than either burrowing down deep or ideally making its way over into the bait box. So now, over on my little green board, you might have noticed the reference to the number of feedings that the main worm bin has received. Only 3, but here I've replenished that bait box 5 times, because on a few occasions I came in here in between check-ins that I would create videos about and just take a moment or two to stir this material up and combine the nice dry stuff out here on the surface with the more damp stuff down low. And my assumption was that each time I did that, I would make the material in general, after it was all stirred and combined, into a material that was less and less comfortable for the worms to remain in, presumably triggering the response in the worms to go seek out something more comfortable. So I did sort of assume, based on the fairly few number of worms I encountered the last time I did this, that perhaps this would be the point in time when we do a quick search throughout the material, presuming that the worms that might still be in it, if there are any, would be down low, where there would be possibly a little bit more moisture than what's out here on the surface. But so far I've not observed any worms, with the exception of that one unfortunate soul that ended up out on the surface. And hopefully it's not expired. It just didn't look too healthy from the look of it. And I think there was one that was sort of stuck to the bottom of the bait box, was probably attempting to get up into it. And we helped that little guy in. But I do believe that now, after 41 days of letting this material gradually dry a little bit around the edges, and at the same time try to lure the worms out of the material with the help of our bait box, I do believe that we can consider this as an evacuated batch of finished castings. So the next step is going to be for us to release the rounded up worms over into the main worm bin, reuniting these little stragglers with the rest of their friends and family, and who knows, maybe we even have a few babies. The other thing you're seeing a lot of in here is springtails. And regrettably, the springtails are going along for the ride too. whatever, it is what it is. I'm not going to worry about it. Springtails just seem to have become a part of life here in my worm bin. Now, I just did notice another worm here. And once again, I do see movement. That's awesome. And I'm wondering if it could have just dropped off the bottom of my bait box here. I should be a little bit more careful. Otherwise, we might have more worms left behind. I will always look around to see if I've lost any wormies, but that's awesome. We've got ourselves a nice fresh batch of castings here to add to my collection. My garden will be pleased. So, also frees up a little bit of space on my shelf to move stuff over. So, next stop, the new worm bin, so we can get them fed and do a little worm reunion. Let's get that going now. My. As soon as I picked up this system, all of a sudden, my disturbance caused a whole bunch of these little tiny flying insects to be aroused and start moving around. So it does seem like we're going to be bringing out my Mosquito Dunks BTI solution and treating this system to try to do away with those little unwanted visitors in the system. Looks like the moisture down within the system was just enough to help the environment become a popular spot for the flying insects to gather in. But luckily I've got my BTI solution. Hopefully it's not been sitting around for so long that it might have gone sort of inactive or ineffective. I don't know how long the stuff is good after it's been prepared or mixed. So I'm just doing my best to get whatever worms I can see on this piece of newspaper off. The newspaper is holding up well enough that I believe we can just continue using it as our top covering. So maybe if I just fold it over a few times, any worms that are still stuck on it won't freak out, and they'll just stay put until we can just get everything back the way we found it at the end. I mean, we've also got a replacement coffee filter, as you may have seen. So this particular one right here can just go into the bin as supplementary bedding. As you can see, the system was built almost at capacity, very close to capacity, leaving me very limited amounts of space to work over here. So I've not been adding any fresh bedding, but like the old coffee filter, feeding zone indicator, perhaps the piece of paper that was also resting over here within the bait box. Perhaps these few things could be used as supplementary bedding as part of today's feeding, along with a couple pieces of cardboard and paper towel and napkin that I have here, but I don't think we're going to go any further than that as far as adding bedding today. The first thing I want to add, though, before we do anything, is my Mosquito Dunks solution. The reason I like to add it in the beginning is because my assumption is that my target audience for this stuff is probably inhabiting the top couple centimeters of material, if that. I'm sure they don't go very deep, these flying insects. So my assumption is that before stirring everything up, it is the best bet to get this stuff applied right onto the larvae of the flying insects. Because you could spray this onto a flying insect all day long, it isn't going to bother it. Its effect comes into play when the flying insect's larvae attempt to transform from a larva into a flying insect. And the BTI solution, the Mosquito Dunks solution, prevents that process from occurring. So here, before disturbing any of this, this is the time to do it, to put this stuff in. So because the system's so darn full, in the past we've not done much exploration down in here. We've pretty much just excavated enough of a space to put the feeding in, put it in, covered it back up, and called it a day. But I do believe that the overall level in the system appears to be settling a little bit. So today I thought maybe if we came in here and the level had dropped a little bit, then maybe we'd have an opportunity to just go and explore the outer edges of the system a bit before we just check the center area to see how their last feeding is coming along. It does appear to me like a lot of this bedding is kind of untracked, if you will, you know. Because when you look through bedding and you see a lot of dark material scattered throughout it, that right there would be the sign that the worms are moving through the stuff and leaving behind their castings. But when you see a whole bunch of bedding material that shows no signs of castings blended into it, that usually is an indicator of not too many worms hanging out in this stuff. So I'm not sure exactly why, but maybe we've got some really nice damp material down low and the worms are kind of driving down towards that to hang out where there's a higher degree of moisture. Perhaps they're all gravitating towards the center of the container where the feedings have been getting applied. So I can only guess, but I assume that blending things together a little bit and just at the same time verifying that the moisture content is not the reason for no worm traffic. I mean, it does feel to me like the moisture level is pretty decent. None of this stuff comes across to me as if it's terribly dry, but I guess perhaps there's no harm in dropping a little bit of additional moisture down into this stuff that we just unearthed, just in case added moisture would help increase traffic onto it. Let's do a similar upturning of this other edge to see what we see. Okay. So once again, I feel like I'm seeing something quite similar. I mean, here and there I do see little tiny black specks that suggest possibly a worm or two has made its way through there and has been exploring it, but not a great deal. Not until I kind of get to the very bottom and I check out the stuff that's at the very bottom. There I do feel like I'm seeing a good bit of castings material piling up, so perhaps the worms are burrowing down deep within the material, perhaps because there's a greater degree of moisture there for them and they're just finding that a lot more comfortable to be in. I'm just sort of guessing, but here, for example, you got a kind of a big block of shredded paper cardboard which shows virtually no signs of any worm traffic in it. I'm glad that we're covering up with that cardboard that's wrapped in plastic, because it does seem to be holding the moisture down quite nicely. When we first opened up the system, that top sheet of newspaper, that top covering, had a good bit of moisture on it and worms up there enjoying it. But once again, I just have this feeling like perhaps adding a little bit more moisture would not be a bad idea, just to further dampen this stuff in case it's just a little bit more moisture that would get the worms feeling comfortable in hanging around and cruising through that stuff as well. So now we're beginning to find that as we stir through all this material and we till it all up, as a result of it being fluffed up, it's all starting to take up a little bit more space in general, giving me that sense that I'm once again very close to the top rim of this container. Well, 41 days of age, it's not a very old system, that's for sure. But I believe that with the plastic coverings, the moisture will continue recirculating, and steadily the whole contents of the bin will get to the point where the worms feel comfortable going to pretty much any section of the bin and exploring it all. Perhaps if I just hadn't built the bin quite as high, quite as full, maybe we'd have different results. But I knew that I was bringing the occupants of two systems in here to populate this thing, and I knew that I wanted to give them plenty of room to roam. But, you know, if they're not able to take advantage of all the material in the container, then it doesn't seem to matter a whole lot how much bedding is in here if it's just sitting there unapproachable by the worm occupants. So hopefully by stirring things around a little bit and by introducing a little bit of extra moisture, maybe we're going to improve things a little bit in here. so that we might see a little bit more worm traffic. Okay, one of these interesting gourds from Halloween, and usually I like to keep things intact, so I figured it wouldn't be too bad if we were to just break a little bit of that end of it off. That was sort of the larger part of it, that bulbous portion of it, since it was so heavily deteriorated anyway. But the rest of it, I think we'll just keep it intact because it's still holding together pretty good. And then there's other things in here, like the half of a seed from a mango. These you probably recognize. These are banana peel. So there's certain things in here that are a little bit slower to break down. Obviously the shell of a mango is a tough material that's going to take some time. And we got a little bit more tough material to give them today. Today I'm deviating from the norm by not giving them stuff that's been frozen in advance. None of this stuff was frozen. It's all fresh. And some of the slow moving items that they're getting today are stuff like this. Avocado peel. And there's an avocado pit in here too. I don't know. The rest of the stuff might go pretty quick. There's a whole pear in there that started to go bad. But I think we've kind of hit our limit on how deep we can go in terms of excavating the feeding zone, because I just don't really feel safe piling stuff any higher than this on the edges for fear of seeing the stuff fly over the edge and end up on the ground or whatever. So why don't we proceed with giving them their portion today. We've definitely got enough room down here to add it. And like I said, we're only adding a little bit of supplementary bedding on this go around in the form of these little bits of cardboard and paper, as well as the recycled feeding zone indicator, since we've got a new one to put in its place, as well as this top covering piece of newspaper, which is bringing with it a fair bit of springtails too, but that's fine. I'm not going to worry too much about it. So I just figured I would take this one larger piece of newspaper and see if I can bust it up into slightly smaller pieces. Try to spread some of this material around a little bit so it's not just sitting in a big wad or a big pile. And then we can start coming in with the leftovers as well as the freshly added food. And I've got my grit here, so we'll sprinkle a little bit of grit in as well. Pretty nice feeding zone here with a nice collection of slow leftovers from previous check-ins. A little bit of additional slow composting food going in as well, combined with a bunch of stuff that's probably going to go pretty quick, such as this pretty heavily spoiled pear. It's already kind of in the breakdown process on its own without the help of the worms. And then this coffee will pile this on top, but that too will probably be a fairly fast moving item. All that bite-sized yummy stuff. Oh, looks like we got ourselves a little bit of avocado that wanted to stick to the side of the container. Let's see what we could do about helping it out of the container and get it down here where it belongs. And here's some more pear. So it's not a huge feeding, although that's in itself right there a pretty good size object, the that whole pear. A whole day's worth of coffee, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Hopefully they appreciate it. So the last thing to do, in case you've lost track, don't forget, we've still got a little bit of a reunion to do, and I'm going to remind everyone of something I really like to do. Each time we release worms into a system, we always turn to the viewers and ask kindly that you leave a comment. Once you've had a chance to see how many worms are added to the system, like I said earlier, the estimated population in the system is thought to be 3,218 worms, but how many worms we're going to be adding today is up to you and me, and we're going to average all our guesses together, and then that amount will be combined with what's thought to be the existing population size. And then at some point, once all the contributions of all the viewers and their comments have settled down and come to an end, I'll be announcing some new number representing the anticipated or estimated population of this system. So as always, please let me know what you think in terms of how many worms we're releasing into here. I'm going to dump them out, and then I'm going to kind of jiggle things around, try to get things moving, and I do believe that all those mites, not even mites, I'm sorry, springtails collecting on that worm that we threw in here in the hopes that he was still going to be okay and a survivor, they've already gathered on there to start with the disposal of that little worm carcass. So unfortunately, I think we've got a goner there. But let's not wait. Let's get these little guys released into their home, along with the rest of their family that moved in here 41 days ago. Some of the worms that we're introducing could actually be babies that were born in the castings, possibly getting reunited with their parents. I just saw a few really puny little worms down here stuck to the plastic. Didn't want to leave them behind. So I'm scraping this out to the best of my ability to see if we can dislodge any worms left behind. I will take another closer look just to make sure we didn't leave anyone behind, but the last thing I'll typically do is try to spread the worms that we've got out so that they all have a fair shot at gaining access to the material below so they can get out of the bright lights, and also so that the viewers can get a quick look at how many worms we're releasing here today. So, as always, please don't forget, leave me a comment, let me know how many worms you think we just added to this system. I do look forward to seeing everyone's comments. And yeah, lots of springtails too. Okay, go wormies. Alright, I think for the most part the worms have made themselves at home, down in their new home, catching up with all their friends and relatives from back in the good old days when they used to all live in two containers all together. So we got ourselves a nice batch of castings. We've got a pretty busy system here with even more worms in it than we had originally when we started. So please, yeah, I look forward to seeing everyone's comments. Let me know how many worms you think we added here today. And oh geez, I forgot to add grit. I always like to add grit, especially to my younger systems. So instead of just skipping it, since I forgot to apply it to the food, I think we'll treat them to putting it out here on the surface. A lot of them do seem to be coming to the surface anyway in pursuit of the moisture that collects beneath the plastic, so I'm sure that this stuff will get gobbled up pretty quickly once the worms start cruising up here to get the moisture. They'll find that stuff and I'm sure it'll be gone in no time. And it looks like folding things over did work because these worms are right where we left them. They're all just still hanging out here on this piece of top covering newspaper. Look at that little guy. So like I said, I'm going to leave this bin out here because I want to still also check the bait box to make sure we didn't leave anyone behind. And gosh, I hope the Mosquito Dunks does away with these little pesky flying insects, because I don't like seeing those in my worm bins. They are a little bit of a nuisance. I am tempted just to swat them when I see them, but I hope that this stuff does away with them probably a little bit more thoroughly than me trying to hit them down individually. Alright everyone, that's it for our check-in with our now 41-day-old system, reuniting the stragglers and the babies with the population, increasing the size of this estimated worm population in here. Please don't forget to leave me a comment, and also, if you enjoyed the video, hopefully you did, leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And finally, if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. Those things are all very much appreciated. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.